Welcome to this today's panel discussion, where we will discuss about the Montenegrin elections and the results. My name is Radoš Mušović. I will be your moderator for today. And I hope that you will have a pleasant morning with us. I do apologize that we cannot be physically with you, but you are all aware of the ongoing pandemic, and please take into account that there could be some technical issues always, but please be muted for the speakers while you're not speaking. And welcome to this event again. I will give you a general introduction from our invitation. You have probably seen the main points of this morning's discussion. We are discussing the consequences of the Montenegrin elections. You know that the Montenegro had elections on the 30th of August. Some would say that the results were rather surprising. We still don't have the government. And today we will mostly discuss about the consequences of these elections from the perspective of civil society. And I'm very happy that today we have a couple of people from Montenegro and a couple of people from Brussels that are very well acquainted with the situation in Montenegro. So without further ado, I will first give the floor to our director, to the director of the European Endowment for Democracy, Mr. Jerzy Pomianowski. Jerzy.
Thank you, Radoš. Thank you very much for introduction. And thank you everybody for joining this seminar here in Brussels. We are at the EED office, although COVID does decimate, of course, everyone and people are not gathering, but we are still able to work from our office with a limited number of staff. That is also the reason why some technical problems may emerge, because people are helping us from not always same location, but from different locations. So thank you very much for your patience. Thank you very much for your understanding. We have about 50 registered participants today, and it's great to see that the topic is generating interest here in the EU community. Montenegro has been for a long time seen as a regional leader when it comes to EU integrations and when it comes to implementing EU legal principles and following EU values. Montenegro opened the negotiations with EU 8 years ago, and it has opened the last negotiation chapter competition during an EU-Montenegro intergovernmental conference held in Brussels this summer. Progress in many areas, including aligning with EU external policies, adopting various laws and regulations according to EU acquis, including excellent progress in building good regional relations, have been noted by many here in Brussels and throughout the EU capitals. However, signs of state capture noted by European Commission in its enlargement strategy, lack of progress in media freedoms, and political interference in the work of the public broadcaster, followed by issues involving, as the US ambassador in Montenegro stated, systemic corruption brought to the country, being seen by organizations such as Freedom House as a hybrid regime. Drop on the democracy index that we all regret. In the last 2 years, main events brought the Montenegrin people to the streets. First was the so-called envelope affair, showing corrupt practices connected to elections, which is a continuation of an issue connected to now famous recording affair. The second was the protest organized by the Serbian Orthodox Church due to the adoption of the law on religious freedoms. Regulation that did not favor this organization, as they claimed, was against their interest. It seems that both events, different in their aims and course, did manage to homogenize different groups within the society and bring the results of the August elections, which as a consequence have Democratic Party of Socialists going into opposition, being for 30 years in power. Obviously, conflict with the Serbian Orthodox Church, which has backing of various formal and informal groups, mostly from Serbia, but also and other regional players, homogenize the Serbian-oriented voters. This has been never done before due to differences even within this political group. but the protests connected to the corruption scandals and affair and the general tiredness of people with the corruption managed to homogenize small yet very relevant group of Montenegrin civic-oriented voters to decline to provide support to DPS and their partners and give to civic green-oriented coalition led by the party called URA. Additionally, Democrat, a centrist catch-all party, has also built their program around multiculturalism, national unity and peace, which brought them around 12% of votes. Now, the hardest part yet to come. Forming a government made of three very different coalitions and not endangering progress made until now will be difficult. All three parties sign an agreement stating that EU and NATO orientation of the country will not change. However, one can be formally devoted to a cause and project one image externally and implement different policies and practices internally. As always within the Western Balkans, the issue is rather complex and asks for a deep analysis. Therefore, we are glad to have four speakers from Montenegro that could help us shine some light on the developments in the country and give us their opinions from the perspective of civil society practitioners. Let me conclude by welcoming EED member of the board, Tonino Picula, member of the European Parliament, and the European Parliament rapporteur for Montenegro and Association Parliamentary Committee, who will make his introductory remarks just after me. Tonino, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jerzy, and good morning to everybody. Thank you for invitation, first of all. I'm happy to share some reflections on titled issue with you. Let's say the recent parliamentary elections in the region were a unique opportunity for citizens to express a clear statement and to evaluate their previously elected representatives. With a high turnout in the parliamentary elections, the citizens of Montenegro sent a strong message that in times of severe health, economic and social uncertainty, they expect their elected officials to behave responsibly and solve systemic problems. You mentioned some of them on the road to the European Union. Their vote also supported, it's my opinion, the path to the European Union, as one can see with overwhelming support for pro-European parties. This is indeed a unique process in Montenegro, where the upcoming change of government will result in a ruling party going into position after not mandate or two, but 13 years. On the eve of the Montenegrin elections, I would like you to remind, together with my colleague Vladimir Bilčik, who is the chair of our European Parliament delegation to Montenegro, we expressed our expectations for free and fair elections in accordance to international standards. I was pleased that elections were conducted in more or less democratic and transparent spirit. It shows strength and responsibility of Montenegrin society, despite rumors challenged as a result of ongoing pandemic. Last week, I have also welcomed the formation of new parliamentary assembly of Montenegro and the first steps in forming a new government, while stressing the need to continue with reforms and the previously set goals on the European Union path. However, allow me to add that I believe the institutions, symbols, and the constitution of Montenegro deserve respect. And for this purpose, I believe that all political actors in Montenegro should respect Montenegrin state symbols and institutions, and of course, act in accordance with the constitutional principles of the country. I hope that all those elected are aware of their responsibility in this time of crisis, which struck, unfortunately, Montenegro severely, especially tourism as a vital part of Montenegrin economy. A newly elected assembly as a representative and as a legislative body must foster a culture of cooperation, dialogue, and constructive debate. despite visible political differences, gaps, and disagreement. I believe that is the key to a successful and healthy parliamentary democracy. Unfortunately, the new parliamentary term of the Assembly will only have 18 female members of the parliament, 3 less than in the previous one, which is certainly not a good message. In the future, I expect to see more actions that foster and promote gender equality. Furthermore, I expect a swift formation of the new government, whose path to European Union membership and current foreign policy goal will be at the top of the list of priorities, in line with the mentioned expectation of citizens. The formation of the new government in Montenegro is underway, and it remains to be seen what changes it brings with it. Agreement between 3 heterogeneous coalitions announces the continuation of the European Union path and already outlined guidelines and foreign policy proposals. Some experiences show that a heterogeneous coalition of ruling parties as such is atypical, but the upcoming challenges for Montenegro have yet to show how it will work in practice. Motivation for the change of government brought them together, it goes without saying, and the question of respecting coalition agreements is one that remains. Certainly, stability and the continuation of the European and the reform path is an absolute priority and something that is important not only for Montenegro, but also for the rest of the region. We must not forget that Montenegro has made, as you said, the most progress in negotiation with the EU, and that is a leader of EU enlargement. Elections in the region were in the past a trigger for a change, and some of them, such as the recent one in North Macedonia, re-energize European Union path, opened the door for solving very complex issues, and ultimately led to significant progress. Unfortunately, another example are the recent parliamentary elections in Serbia, with the boycott of the opposition forces and a worrying trend of democratic deterioration in an atmosphere that is definitely not progressive, although some of their parties are claiming progressiveness in the name. As European Parliament rapporteur for Montenegro, I was also very happy to hear the news that Montenegro opened up their final chapter before the summer break. I believe that we have sent good message in these months and will continue to do so. In his inaugural speech in the European Parliament, Commissioner for Enlargement Varhelyi pointed out that this and his goal is to complete negotiations with at least one country by 2024. Personally, I would like to see that happen, and that Montenegro, as the most advanced country in negotiation process, concludes the negotiations. European Union is well aware that it needs to deliver on promises and has underlined many times that EU is not complete without Western Balkans. However, EU is not here to give false hope prematurely, and there is still a lot of work to do on the path of the European Union. That is definitely not a warning sign to Montenegro and other countries of the region, but I would say a motivation to work actively and wholeheartedly to achieve EU membership. The effect of the new Montenegrin government, its ambition and its performance will definitely be measured in that aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pitsula. It's our pleasure to have this morning another member of the European Parliament, a face that is very familiar in the Balkans, if I may say, Mr. Vladimir Bilčik, who's the chair of the delegation to the EU and Montenegro Stabilization and Association Parliamentary Committee. So, Mr. Bilčik, you have the floor and welcome.
Thank you very much, and a very good morning to everyone. And congratulations on having this important conference. It's important both in its timing, but also in the contents. I would like to pick up where the 2 previous speakers left off without trying not to repeat too much what has been said, and maybe add a couple of my personal remarks. It's been a long year. It's been a very long year already in Europe and especially in the Western Balkans. When we look at the political calendar, the events, a lot has happened since the start of the year. We had a big discussion early on this year about enlargement, the very essence of enlargement. And I think we managed very well to reach a strong, solid consensus on enlargement among the European Union member states. For the first time in years, we had a serious discussion in the European Council about enlargement, and we revised the methodology with the goal of really being fully committed across the EU institutions to the European perspective, to enlargement in the Western Balkans. This was an important signal which was clearly sent out to the region by the EU before the onset of the pandemic. And of course, the pandemic came, and we've been stuck to conversations largely online like this. And I'm very sorry to say that I was in Podgorica at the end of February with the European Parliament's delegation. We had 3 fruitful days, really good meetings with all the interlocutors. And we knew this would be an important political year because of the elections, but also because of a great sense of anticipation, both in the EU and in the region in terms of what comes next in our mutual work and mutual commitment to the European perspective. Whilst we haven't been in the region, we have watched very, very closely because it's been a year of elections. We already had 3 big elections, starting with Serbia, continuing with North Macedonia, and most recently with Montenegro. Of course, we also have local elections coming up in Bosnia and Herzegovina later this fall. And all of this very important events when it comes to really just looking ahead in terms of how we can proceed towards the fulfillment of the goal which we all cherish in the European Parliament. And this is something I very much share with my colleague Tonino Picula, but also with the majority of the members of the European Parliament. And that is the goal of enlargement. Indeed, it is the strategic goal of the EU institutions to have at least one country ready for enlargement by the end of the institutional cycle. And in that sense, we have a great sense of expectations, and I'm really looking forward to listening to you and to listening to this debate in terms of what comes next for Montenegro. Because, of course, enlargement is not just about a commitment, it's not just about words, it's about work and delivery. And I've said it since I took off as the head of the European Parliament's delegation for our relations with Montenegro, that Montenegro must start running. It's good that all the chapters have been opened, but hardly any chapters have been closed. And this is about real reforms, real work. And here I think we watch very closely the elections. I think change is healthy in a democracy. But I also hope that the change of government in Montenegro is managed well. And managed well means that it really respects the democratic institutions of the state. It respects the integrity of the state. And moreover, it really underlines the commitment to the European future of Montenegro. Montenegro has been by far and very clearly not only the frontrunner in the process, but also a very committed pro-Western country in the Western Balkans. Having joined NATO a few years ago and having been fully committed to the European Union's foreign and security policy, and of course working also on opening the negotiating chapters. Now it's time to do the real hard work, and the real hard work is about political commitment to real reforms. And I'm actually hopeful here that the change in the parliament can mean that the parliament actually works as a full-fledged parliament. This is something we have seen in the region across the countries in the Western Balkans as a challenge. I myself am also the standing rapporteur for Serbia, and I was involved very heavily in the inter-party dialogue in Serbia in the run-up to Serbian elections. And of course, the issue of boycott of parliamentary institutions, of the elections, is and has been an ongoing challenge in the region. So perhaps this election, the change of power, can maybe put an end to boycott in Montenegro. This would be very, very useful and very good news in terms of really the work which is ahead and which must be done by Montenegro. So I would like to really hear your reflections. I'm very curious to see how you see the situation. I would also like to say and reiterate that we are in the European Parliament awaiting the formation of all the parliamentary bodies, but of course the formation of the new government. We are ready to get engaged as soon as possible in our next meeting with the Montenegrin part of the delegation, so we can really meet, ideally in person, but at least online with our counterparts and discuss the progress, but also the challenges ahead. And this is what I look forward to doing, and of course anticipating that really there is continuity in Montenegro, at least in one important sense. And nobody questions in any way that Montenegro's future is in the European Union. I'm a firm believer in that, and I hope that we can also jointly contribute to that goal through our efforts. So I wish you a successful conference, and of course I look forward to listening and of course really learning what you have to say, because this is also important news to us in the European Parliament at the moment, as it is a bit frustrating to be stuck at home. But let's overcome this. The pandemic will end. We will be back on the ground and ready to engage even more thoroughly. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bilcik. So I think this concludes the introductory part of today's event. Thank you to all of the three gentlemen that gave their remarks. Please bear with me while I introduce our speakers from today, and I'm very happy that we have four very active, let's say, Montenegrins in the public sphere, in the media and think tanks, civil society, the economic sphere, and also some of them with previous experience in electoral confidence, governments of electoral confidence. And if I may say so, I think we have around 3 of panelists are currently being discussed as in the media as someone who is a possible candidate for one of the ministerial spots or positions. And I'll give them the opportunity to discuss if this is just a media headline or this is something that is reality. So let me first introduce Ms. Milka Tadic-Miovic. I won't go through her biography, but Milka is a very known face in Montenegro, a journalist, a media editor, someone who's leading the NGO Center for Investigative Reporting, and someone who was very famous in the 90s, especially as an anti-war activist. If I may say so, the first journalist that got fired in Montenegro. I think this is something to be very proud today for being anti-Milosevic or for being anti-war. So Milka, welcome. The second speaker for today is Ms. Jovana Marovic. First, let me introduce the ladies. Ms. Jovana Marovic leads the think tank Politico Network, someone who has experience in foreign relations. She's a member of BIEPAG, non-formal organization or group that's very familiar to many of us. And also she's an expert in EU policies and external affairs. So it'd be lovely to see her perspective on where Montenegro is heading in the future. The third is Mr. Boris Maric. Boris is a well-known legal scholar, a lawyer, and a civic activist, but someone who has a lot of experience in politics and was a minister of labor in one of the governments of the electoral confidence. And the fourth speaker for today is Mr. Miloš Vukovic. If Miloš won't mind if I say a new face in the Montenegrin public sphere, but someone who is very well known in the economic sphere and someone who understands these happenings. So welcome everyone. Let me just say that we are very happy to have this kind of perspective, and I think from the side of the EED, but also from everyone in Brussels, I think your opinions and your views are something that really, really matters for us, because different analysis can come from different sides, but the actors that are involved in the happenings and activities in the country are most important. So let me just go straight to the point. And this might be an unusual first question, but I have the same question for all the speakers at the beginning, starting with Milka. I'll just repeat the question so we can go in a row that I transfer. It's the 30th of August. We all know that the exit rates, the exit polls are showing that many Montenegrin citizens are going out and voting despite of the COVID restrictions, despite of line, despite of very warm weather, which is an important factor in Montenegro in voting sometimes. And it's coming to 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the evening, the first results are coming in. We are all very much aware that high exit rate means lower points and lower votes for the ruling DPS. But while you listen to the results, the first results going out, what is your first thing that goes through your head? What do you think about? What kind of opinions and emotions are going through your head? Milka.
So first of all, thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about Montenegro after the elections. I think it is very important to talk about this and to talk with Brussels because Brussels is the most important partner of Montenegro now, and I hope it will be in the future. Thank you for the question. I must say that all day was an extraordinary because of the turnout, and I felt that something significant might happen. But on another hand, as somebody who has been following so many elections, I doubt is it really possible to turn to defeat DPS on the elections. So my first feelings when we realized that actually DPS is losing were hopes and concerns. I think the changes are really historical, because as many actors said, we never changed power through free elections in our entire history. But there are, of course, and the first, I think the changes are really healthy, and we needed the changes. The concerns are normal, I think, in these situations, because we have different actors on the political scene now. We will see how these three coalitions will get together. But I think the agreement which they signed the day after the elections is a good sign for the future.
Thank you, Milka. I know that it's in a Montenegrin cultural tradition to speak a lot, but please, the first question, just take 2 minutes to answer. Jovana, what was going through your head? What were your first impressions?
Hello, Rad. Hello, everybody. My thoughts were the same as always during the election day, and it's at 9 o'clock when the results start to arrive. Well, I was hopeful, but somehow without optimism, because every time when we are hopeful about the results and about the outcome, something actually turns around and something happened. That everything went to Djukanovic's side and DPS, because they always had an institutional advantage. They always had this support from the international community. They always had some scenarios, you know, somehow to influence the results at the end. So there was a hope, but somehow we were all confused about the results at the end. So many of us was hoped about such scenario, but no one actually could have predicted such outcome. That's it for us.
Thank you, Jovana. Thank you. And that was
Thank you.
very short. Very short.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Milos, what were your first impressions?
Well, hello from my side and to all the people who are watching us and to all the guest panelists and our colleagues from Brussels. Well, I felt almost like 21st of May in 2006 when we renewed our independence. And I was very excited about this historical second step towards full democracy that Montenegro deserves. However, immediately after, the first celebrations really worried me because I believe that both in Podgorica and in north of Montenegro, there were some not very good celebrations of the victory in our country, which is known for multi-confessional and multinational country. So this overshadowed my excitement, and I immediately started to think about strong economic problems that Montenegro is going to face since we are a heavily indebted country. Our GDP to public debt will be around 100%. We have this devastating effect of coronavirus for our tourism, where we perform the worst from the countries. I mean, in the world, around 86% was the downfall of tourism revenues. With all the other factors such as high unemployment rate, especially among young people, especially among women as well, especially when we have these numerous other problems, I really believe that it will be a big challenge for the future government when this dust settles down to overcome these huge economic problems. And just for the end, I would say that we changed for the first time in our history the ruling party with pencil, without weapons, which is very important for us. And it will be extremely challenging to close down all the chapters. I do believe that we will be the first new member of European Union in 2024. It will be tough, it will be hard, but we have lots of homework to do. But I believe that all stakeholders of our country must understand that our only future is within EU without any reserves, and we have to start to dig really deep to face all the challenges that we are facing.
Thank you, Milos. Before I give the floor to Boris, let me just explain to the ones that are following this event. So Boris will speak in Montenegrin. You have an option to choose the interpretation. Don't be surprised because the French interpretation says it's from French to English, but because Zoom doesn't show the option of Montenegrin, I guess. So be free to use the interpretation, click on French from English, and you'll hear the interpretation from Montenegrin to English. So Boris, the same question for you. What were the first thoughts that went through your head? And be free to speak in Montenegrin.
First, I'm sorry for talking Montenegrin. Da vas pozdravim I
I would like to greet you and say that my first emotion was concern, although I was rather happy with the fact that an argument that I had advocated for a long time was confirming, that is, that it was possible for the DPS to lose the elections. But my concern was real, because this happened with a significant degree of participation by the right-wing forces in Montenegro, who do not hide, and it was always legitimate to me, that they have a pronounced nationalist approach to politics. What's good is that some trends that we've seen after the elections are positive. This is above all the fact that we have a strong majority in favor of Montenegro's sovereignty, a strong majority for our road to the EU, and that it was impossible to start replacing the DPS without a serious amount of participation of civic structures And URA here is decisive, and they are undoubtedly a civic structure. They're decisive for what will be happening in the period to come. And that is great responsibility for a structure that perhaps at the moment doesn't have the necessary force. But if the civil sections and democratic sections of the society activate, we can have a stable change of power. Although I'm convinced that the government, if it gets to be formed, will not last long, will last a relatively short time, and we'll soon have new elections, probably in the run-up to the presidential elections and the end of Djukanovic's mandate. What's most important at the moment is to focus on the reforms, on the difficult economic situation, on the attempt to homogenize the structure that's definitely a serious majority, a plebiscite majority, and that's the structure that's advocating what the constitution also prescribes, and that's a Montenegro of its citizens. If I get the chance, I can also discuss some risks that are real risks in the process, but I do believe that Montenegro as a society has the force to strongly go towards the EU. Thank you.
Thank you, Boris. It seems from your answers that all four of you didn't have a good night's sleep that night, that you were awake the whole night thinking about a lot of issues facing Montenegro, and all very legit and right. But Boris gave me a great intro for the next question that I want to ask to Jovana. I mean, if you look at the Montenegrin newspapers and even the regional ones, the main issue that is talked about is how are these right-wing forces, how is the Democratic Front, which is the major player in this, it has the biggest number of votes, how is this going to reflect in the external policies, but also security policies within the country? So Jovana, we are all very much aware that there is this agreement signed between all these three parties saying, yes, we stay committed to the NATO, we stay committed to EU, there will be no coming back from the recognition of Kosovo, there'll be no changes in the strategic pathway in Montenegro. However, there's a struggle that's very, very visible in Montenegro, that's visible to all of us between all these three coalitions, let's say, concerning the issue who is going to lead the security, military, and defense structures and foreign policy within Montenegro. And if I may say so, Boris said the emphasis currently should be on the reforms, but if you open the Montenegrin newspapers, this is the topic #1. So my question to you is, can this party, URA, which is a civic party that's saying no, right-wing people, no, not serious people, no, not anyone who is currently on trial or was convicted can be in this process. Do they have enough power to lead this and to save these institutions from these right-wing actors? Or do you think that this is something that they will cave in at some point, either on the top level or in the deep level of the structure of these structures?
Well, thank you, Radosh. There were and there are many doubts and many questions and many doubts that this, let's say, structure or three coalitions from opposition which will form the new government are able actually, that they have capacity to continue with the foreign policy course, with the obligations, fulfillment of obligations from the NATO membership, that they will actually speed up the European integration process. And actually such doubts are somehow, you know, there is some ground for such questions, because the opposition does not have experience of somehow leading the government and leading the European integration processes. They have they have experience from the local level, but this experience is not the same as the, you know, leading the government at the national level. And also there is a lack of capacity, and that means first of all within the this black and white coalition and URA, which is really moderate and civic party, but it's really small with lack of capacity at many levels. But somehow, you know, better Montenegro will change the foreign policy course is the most important question within the international community, but also within the country. And as already Boris and Milka said, there is agreement between the three coalition members. There are principles which are already agreed between the coalitions. And you know that there is a set of obligations, of set of measures, what Montenegro will not do in the future. For example, Montenegro will not leave NATO, Montenegro will not derecognize Kosovo, Montenegro will speed up the European integration process and everything, but this is really not an easy task. That means that, for example, one of the coalition members actually got the speaker of the parliament, that's the Democrats, and then the future prime minister will be from the DEF, which is pro-Serbian, pro-radical, populist bloc within the opposition, and that means that URA is expecting to control security sector and all relevant, let's say, ministries within the new government, which means the foreign policy sector, which means the Ministry of Interior, that means police and everything. And I think that that's something which should be in place, you know, in the new government. As I said, if you are somehow have this balance between the three coalition members, if all three coalitions are members of the new government, that means that URA should control these sectors in order to have somehow guarantees that that Montenegro will not change the foreign policy course. But the second thing is also, you know, whether this government will be pro-European and pro-Western, that depends also on the European agenda, meaning what will be the most important reforms, you know, which this government will take. That means, for example, all of you said that Montenegro so far opened 33 chapters, but was able to close just 3 chapters. Then also that Montenegro actually accepted the new methodology, which was presented by the European Commission in February. Montenegro accepted it in May during the pandemic, which was really had symbolic character. And in that sense, you know, now is the question what this new government has to do within the European integration process, you know, to have this clear perspective and clear, you know, path towards the membership. And this is something which was, you know, really neglected by the previous government, because previous government was really successful in fulfilling technical criteria, but without any kind of success within the chapters 23 and 24. And within the new approach of the European Commission, the chapters 23 and 24, the rule of law will be also crucial, you know, for the progressing in the European integration process. So we are expecting now to have track record within the, these 2 chapters, 23 and 24. We are expecting to have more, let's say, really better fight against corruption and organized crime. We are expecting to see that the new government will not have clientelism in its core, and we are expecting to see you know, but also different kind and different approach from the European Union level, because that's something which is also important for the EU membership and perspective. So these are some, you know, most important lines and most important priorities for the government. For now, we have this agreement and we have this like common understanding that the new government has to follow what was good from the previous one, and that's just this foreign policy course and this NATO membership, and the new government has somehow to speed up the European integration process.
Thank you, Jovana. I think it's a great intro for the next question. Boris, Jovana mentioned, and you also mentioned before, that the reforms of many sectors should be in the focus. But however, this whole, after the 30th, we had this narrative that we will have an expert government, that the best among the Montenegrins, no matter their nationality, religion, or any other creed, would be asked to go into this government and support the future reforms of the country. But the narrative has been changing. So 30 days after the elections, we don't hear that much about the expert government. We hear a lot of talk about, well, we have a lot of skilled politicians within these political parties and the coalitions. A lot of these parties already had meetings concluding that they will ask for certain positions within the new government, and that this is something that their voters and their party members are expecting. So having in mind all of this, you have been a minister in one of the previous technical governments, let's call it like this. If I understood correctly, there was many obstacles to your work. Public officials taking documents, hiding documents, a lot of obstruction to your work, to your need to depoliticize the system. Having in mind all of this, that the first narrative now that is created is grabbing of the positions. Is it possible to depoliticize the public administration, which was completely politicized by the EPS and its members? And under which conditions, if the Serbian, for example, Democratic Front says there are not enough Serbians in the government, we want more of them. And we have another line and another path of employing more and more people in the public administration just because of them participating or being a part of one or another group.
Thank you, Radoš. Zbog ovoga moram da govorim na crnogorskom.
I will speak in Montenegrin because this is very complicated and my English is not so good to explain this. So you asked many questions. This is actually a systemic issue, but I will try to make a summary of this. First of all, I believe that the complete opposition, as a rule, does not have a sufficient number of skilled people who would be working in public administration. And this shortage of skilled staff might be a problem to them and to the persistence of the new government. As for the new ministries, when it comes to security structures, as Jovana mentioned, ORA is the party which could be there to guarantee the full-fledged membership of NATO and EU accession. But it all depends on what is going to happen, because DPS has been obstructing reforms. In time to come, we will see how DPS will politically behave, and the speed of reforms will depend on DPS's behavior and on certain positions in Montenegrin society. What do I refer to? I refer to the fact that DPS can take two parts. The first part is for the DPS to become a Montenegrin, let's say, democratic front. And the second part is for DPS to be transformed into a modern party, a social democratic party. By reforming itself, DPS would help the future government in avoiding the risks that Radoš mentioned. I refer to the risk of influence by democratic front in terms of additionally contaminating public administration by potentially requesting that public administration starts employing people based on the basis of their nationality. This would be opposite to any kind of reforms. I believe this is not going to happen. But if there are tendencies of this kind, we will have a new political crisis and new elections coming up soon. So reforms will also depend on the power of the civil bloc. So DPS should be observed in terms of how much power and strength they will have and what will they do in the time to come. I believe that URA is the structure that is going to gain more strength, and that is a good news. Democrats of Montenegro as a party will also gain in strength. But some people, some voters will abstain from voting in the future. On the other side, you have pro-nationalist Serbian, pro-Serb bloc in Montenegro, which has produced measurable results at this point. But I believe that this is the peak that they have reached and that they cannot go any further. Interestingly enough, we will see what happens with this new government if it is set up at all, and how they will distribute all the departments and ministries. I think that they are not aware still what is ahead of them. For instance, they don't speak about the Ministry of Finance. They are not interested in the Ministry of Finance because they know that the most of the problems are with that ministry. They are interested in some other structures. Also, there is the Investment and Development Fund in Montenegro that has 150 million euro that can be very useful and interesting for future reforms of our economy. On the other hand, there is a Ministry of Public Administration and main chief negotiator with the EU are very important positions. And if you want to accelerate negotiations, you would be interested in this. So I believe that unfruitful fight against corruption and organized crime resulted from the fact that DPS did not allow essential reforms of the institutions. They basically set up the system, they inherited the system actually. This was a one-party system previously. And in that kind of system, one party decided how much one institution will be working or will not be working. So we will see what happens. We will see, because there is a huge challenge ahead of people dealing with this in terms of how they will fill in positions in public administrations. What will they give priorities to? Maybe they will seek to strengthen their political positions, but that maybe will not be an absolute rule. Maybe they will be true and in their reforms, and maybe, as Radoš said, they will be setting up an expert government. We'll see what happens. Now I see that they are ready for some compromises. They say that certain political or politicians can enter the government. There is another question. We will have a very dynamic parliament in Montenegro, and that is a good news. We see in the region parliaments have become completely irrelevant. In Montenegro, parliament is going to regain its importance, which is good. So it might be good that prime minister and deputy prime ministers are politicians, but on the other levels there should be experts. Why? Because these politicians would be helping experts in the parliament. In this way, we will have a dynamic parliament, and these experts, these ministers, will have to know what they should do. And I believe that we should accelerate reforms, and we should accelerate our path to the European Union. That's all from my side. I've just had so many things to say, but I tried to summarize it.
At the beginning, It's always complicated when it comes to the Western Balkans, but it's good to have you here to kind of showcase experience from within. Milka, Boris said that we will have a strong parliament and that we're entering into a phase of a strong parliament. But aren't we entering also a phase where the church has becoming a very, very important political player in this game? We have talked a lot about URA, for example, and you have supported them openly and their coalition. But it doesn't escape me that they only have 4 mandates within this government, and that they have shown a certain ability to compromise when it comes to things that some other players wouldn't. For example, meeting in monasteries and churches, openly accepting that the church is a player within this game and that the church's influence is very, very relevant. When they go into the government on these kind of conditions, you know, will they be able to implement their civic reform? Do you see them in the future? And I posed a similar question to Jovana when it comes to external affairs. But just to go back to this, 4 mandates within the parliament, will they be able to implement anything having in mind the number of members of the parliament on the other side with different ideologies and other people within the new government who think differently from them? Milka, if you could just unmute yourself.
Thank you very much for this question, Radoš. It is actually, I think, a crucial question for Montenegro. And there are, as I said in my previous answer, I had many fears and concerns. What actually will be our future? Right now, Montenegro is deeply divided, and when we are talking about the nationalism, we must not just pay attention to the Serbian nationalism, but to the Montenegrin nationalism as well, which was supported by Mr. Đukanović. And when we are talking about it, that was actually, I think, his only ticket for these elections, because he did not have achievement in reforms and in other rule of law and in other fields. And when we are talking about the church is really playing an important role right now in Montenegro. But we have to have in mind that actually church came to the scene because of the law introduced by Mr. Đukanović and his DPS, which was actually law against the biggest religious group in Montenegro. So we have to have all this in mind when we are talking about the future steps. There is no future for Montenegro without strong civic orientated parties and politics, which is because Montenegro needs all its citizens and all its nations and all groups and minorities and all of that. So the first I think test will be the government. Who will have in this government? Are minority going to support the government? There are some signs that they would support the new government, and probably they will have the places there because they supported Mr. Bečić for the Speaker of the Parliament. So there are many open issues, but I think if this government will concentrate on the real problems, and our problems are mostly economic problems. We have a deep economic crisis, we have a health crisis, we have problems with the educations. So if we are, when we are talking about internal policy, are going to concentrate on this issue, so I think we will be on a good track. It is true that the URA has only 4 places in the parliament, but as someone else said before, they are not the only civic orientated MPs. Democrats are as well, you know, not, we cannot say that the Democrats are nationalists. There are many others, and I think in our parliament we have maybe only 10% of the radical nationalists. So that's why I believe that the new government would really concentrate on the real issues. And I think that these results, election results, are showing that actually society is asking for the changes. And I often think that citizens are more mature than the political elite. Most of the citizens would like to live in the normal society. You know, they are really concentrating on the real issues. We are all in the Balkans, I think, tired of the big topics such as a nation, the church, the God, and those issues which are not really changing our life in better.
Thank you, Milka. I mean, not to disagree, but the church and God brought thousands and thousands of people on the street. So I guess this is still a sign of a maturing political culture in the region. But while we talk about all these issues, one of the things that are on my mind is, how will we pay for all this? How will we survive the winter, let's say, having in mind that the proposed prime minister had one of the statements saying that he's not sure will be there any money for pensions and salaries in the future couple of months. So Milos, you're the economic expert. Could you tell us what is the current state of economy in Montenegro, and do you think that these 3 different coalitions can agree on any kind of economic issues, economic reform, or if they have any capacities to do so, having in mind that they have no experience in government?
Well, I think this is the only thing that they are actually agreeing about, because we all know that after 30 years of the same ruling party and the same mechanisms of ruling, the most important thing will be to change the economic model, which has proven unsustainable here in Montenegro. So when you listen to all the leaders and everybody who is from these 3 coalitions, they are, even the ruling party says that we did certain things wrong, and they acknowledge this during the summer season. So I think there is a consensus in Montenegro that our current economic development model was wrong. And we started negotiations with EU 8 years ago. Croatia finished them in 8 years, and we are still here. And we have been wasting these 8 years instead of focusing on improving living standards of our neighbors and ourselves. We spend this time in certain unproductive investments, such as a highway, which is financed by this Chinese loan, which is indexed in dollars, and which is one of the only projects in which CBRC is overdue. And I'm afraid of certain problems which will arise from this issue. And it will be very hard. The expectations are enormous. They are huge. And I think it will be very hard to change this model in short term. And it will be more, instead of change, more the adaptation on the what we have so far. And there is no money, new money, because our public debt has exploded to almost, it will be 100% in near future with the state guarantees. So you cannot do anything new without the money. So our poor economic indicators are numerous. And I would just like to say that since we gained independence, our public debt exploded 5 times more. That 70% of our young people, which we rely on future, want to go from this country. women, which are majority in our country, are less paid, and they don't hold too much positions, power position in Montenegro. What else? 90% of revenues in tourism will be missing. Most of the foreign direct investments are actually not coming from European Union, but they come from other countries, which is very strange, since most of the trade we do with European Union, which shows that we are lacking quality and credible investors from European Union. And we engaged with IMF. It's very interesting that the only two countries are Albania and Montenegro, which are the only NATO member states who are accessing this IMF rapid financing support. And I believe that this is very clear indicator about our economic indicators and what's in there for near future. We are not member of European Union. We don't have this new access, next generation EU, which according to some calculation, we would have 1 billion euros more of free money for us, which is for our small economic system very important. And these crises for coronavirus really will punch us hard in the face, and we have really to do some things which in the short term gain some quick wins. But I think that in the long term, without 8 years, let's say 2 full mandates of the government, you cannot do much. Some of the proposals, I would really think seriously about entering into very stronger arrangement with IMF, International Monetary Fund, in order to stabilize the public finances, and it gives you a good shelter for radical economic and social measures that the new government will have to take, especially in grown public sector, which has grown and it's very, in certain areas, very unproductive. There has to be distribution of wealth in a more better way, in a more quality way, to increase the taxes for the wealthier part of the society in order to finance the health system, which will need additional financing, and socially endangered people. And this very good geo-economic and geopolitical trend with China, with European Union moving its supply chains from China to European Union, I believe that this is a good chance to attract some of these companies from European Union who are moving their production from China into EU, and to say to them, okay, we have the resources, we have the people, we will give you tax breaks, and please open these factories in our country. And with a couple of those big factories, you can really do great things in Montenegro. And let's say on this green side that we have to align with European Union climate neutral in 2050, which is a great goal, but for our small country, it's very good. And I think that we can do this without too many resources which are needed to achieve this goal.
Thank you, Miloš. No wonder you've been discussed as a candidate for the Minister of Finance. I mean, thank you very much for this analysis. I apologize to our participants who are looking at the viewing through live stream. From all the excitement of talking with Montenegrins, I forgot to tell you, you can ask questions in the Q&A and chat part of Zoom. So be free to ask a question. I definitely missed a couple of relevant issues. We don't have days and days to discuss about it, but ask a question, write in the Q&A part who you want this question to be asked, and I'll make sure that in the next 20-25 minutes, this is something that our panelists can answer. But before we go through that, Jovana, a question for you. Going back to the foreign policy issues and the international participation of the international community in this, let's say, new government. DPS, formerly ruling party for 30 years, as you said, had very good track record on foreign policy. But they released, I think, a couple of days after the elections, a very, very unusual statement, press release, saying, where is the international community now? It was quiet for the last 8 months. It didn't react to the influence of the church and the right-wing players. And in the future period, we would expect, and I think I'm quoting correctly, of the international community not to interfere in Montenegrin issues. From a party that was pro-Western, that was very connected to the international community, that welcomed any Western, let's say, influence, to a party that says, now, don't interfere. Is this, if you're not supporting us, is this the logic? If you're not supporting us, then don't talk, don't interfere. What is your opinion on this very unusual statement?
Yes, such statement was really unusual and was not diplomatic, and it was, you know, because of lack of patience from the DPS side, because they expected different reaction from the international community, and the international community was, you know, really somehow positive about the outcome of the elections in Montenegro, and they somehow not supported, but somehow they respected the results, and they said, we are looking forward to cooperate with the new government. So for the DPS, it was right for the international community to be involved when they are supporting, you know, the DPS, but when they are against, when they are, you know, somehow seeing what is happening on the ground, that wasn't, you know, such, you know, good move from the international community. But the DPS was, you know, not just because of this reaction and this statement, which was really official statement and which is really problematic for one pro-European, pro-Western party and the government, that actually they have such reactions towards the international community. They actually continued to divide society, you know, here, because for them, through their activities and through their, like, you know, even Twitter accounts, they are calling people which voted against DPS as chatniks, and everyone who voted against the DPS and is now like pro-Russian, pro-Serbian, and there is even pressure, you know, on civil society, activists in civil society. If you are supporting the new government, if you are supporting the changes in Montenegro, then you are pro-Russian, and then you are supporting DF and these radical movements in the country. So somehow DPS is going, as always, you know, they're dividing the society, and they're somehow targeting enemies inside and outside.
Thank you, Jovana, for that clarification. We have a couple of questions. I'll wait for a couple of more to come, and then I can ask them. But just a question about the media scene in Montenegro. For the ones that are aware of the situation in Montenegro, the European Commission has criticized for a number of years the situation when it comes to the media polarization and media freedoms. And I see a question coming up on that in Montenegro. Milka, the country is not ranked well on many of different indexes when it comes to media freedom. DPS has, for the last couple of years, allowed for political interference in the public broadcasting system. There's a lot of issues with media attacks and a lot of different cases that are not completely solved. And also, there's no full financial independence, having in mind that the most advertising that comes to media outlets comes from the government and government-connected companies or government-owned companies. But my question is a little different now. Having in mind that we're having a new government, in previous period, we have a number of portals, number of media outlets supported by DPS in one way or another through funding. This is what kept them alive. A lot of them have no real revenue. But now when we have a different situation, we have different political players that have their own media connected to them. The right-wing Democratic Front, for example, has a lot of different, let's say, Serbian-funded, some of them Russian-funded media outlets that could go into the place of previous DPS-connected media. The same with URA. Let's be honest, URA is connected and is supported by the media outlet Viesti, who is one of the most popular ones in this way or another in the country. Do you think that this will change? That we'll have an independent support to media, or that they will just switch roles?
What I think this media actually issue, it will be the test of the new government. Are we going to have a reform, Europe-oriented government or not? It will actually, we will see if they are going to change the situation in media, it would be a good sign. First of all, I think we need to change the media laws. First, the RTCG should really become and should be transformed to the real public service. That is so important for the Montenegro and to have actually a pluralism in media. So right now, as you said, Radoš, RTCG actually was captured by the DPS and the ruling political elite. The other important issue is actually to have a free media market in Montenegro. If we do not have a free media market, we will not have a free media. It's actually, it is really very, very, very simple. But I must say that I was not encouraged by some messages from some of the representatives of the winning political parties, because they have they start with the same sentence as DPS representatives. It seems that they would like as well to control media in Montenegro. It will not be it is not a good sign. And I hope that the new government will really pay attention and change the situation. As you know, we are now, according to the Reporters Without Borders, on 105th place in Europe, one of the lowest in Europe. So we have a lot of work to do. And we have, I think, politicians who are trying to control media, and the media has to fight for the freedom in the future.
Thank you, Milka. A question from our viewers. I think I can pose this question to Boris. Very short, Boris, please. The question is on the role of the Montenegrin parliament. All of you agree that the parliament will be now important and will be more stronger. For the audience back in Brussels and in EU capitals and someone that's not in Montenegro, why? Why is this the case? Could you explain it?
Sorry. Evo, vrlo kratko, znači...
Briefly, first we have the results of the elections that are quite tight, and we'll have a government that will constantly be facing problems with its stability. If the government works well, then it will have some legitimacy to survive. If there is anything bad, it will be easy to topple that government. Where will it be toppled? In the parliament. After a long time, we now have a parliament that can topple a government at any moment. It is a strong parliament. We used to have Djukanovic, who was very worried that he made Montenegrin parliament stronger. And he started talking about parliamentary dictatorship. Of course, there is no parliamentary dictatorship. What we will have is grandiose return of politics in Montenegro precisely through the parliament. Everyone will be looking for their space there, and I think they will initiate a speeding up of reforms in Montenegro. This might sound strange at the moment, but the parliament will be the one to push the executive to be good, and if they're not good, we'll have a new political crisis. Whether we'll have a new setup of power or support for some minority government, different scenarios are possible precisely because the parliament will be dynamic and because it will have a say. For the first time, after all, you have in the parliament somebody who will be heading the parliament, and he comes from the opposition, that Mr. Bečić, who is young and promising, and his political ambition, I'm sure, includes the wish to show that this parliament should be a place for democratization of Montenegro. Our citizens will watch that and will see if he'll be successful. And as Milka said, citizens, and I agree, are more mature still than the political elites leading them.
Thank you, Susan, for asking this question. Jovana, very quickly, we have one of our viewers asking about the future relations between Serbia and Montenegro. What will be the future steps and the progress? We have seen that in Belgrade, in Banja Luka, in north of Kosovo, there's been many celebrations concerning these election results. What does this mean in real life, and do you see any kind of changes within these relationships in the future?
Just to use one joke from Montenegro, Montenegro is not going anywhere, so neće ona niđe. Anyway, this is about, some concerns that there will be intentions from the new government to unite again with Serbia, so this is not on the agenda. And somehow, there are two Serbias in Serbia, like one moderate and one which is pro-Vučić Serbia, and different reactions from two Serbias regarding the results in Montenegro. So we can expect from Vučić the same, let's say, policy towards Montenegro. That's something which is really, and we are not sure whether he is happy now with this new, let's say, prime minister and some, let's say, ministers that will be in the new government. So we will see what will be developments regarding the relations between Serbia and Montenegro. But so far we are confused, even with the reactions from Serbia, what is really concrete and what is true, that actually Serbian Orthodox Church supported DF during the campaign. But as I said, we are not sure whether this is connected with Vučić or not.
Thank you, Jovana. Another question I think this will be a great question for Boris. Judicial reforms are long overdue and much needed to deal with many affairs. What do you see as the main challenges for the independent judiciary in Montenegro? Please be very short.
Okay, I see a question. Ovako, što se tiče...
When it comes to judicial reform, this is going to be the most complicated part of the reforms to be conducted by the new government, because judiciary under the constitution needs to be independent. It is a separate part of power. And we have heard about some affairs in the judicial system. One of the greatest affairs, in my opinion, is the appointment of the president of the Supreme Court. This appointment has been contrary to the constitution. As for the Judicial Council, we also don't have a president of that council. We have an acting president. We need to actually still appoint members of the Judicial Council, because this Judicial Council has never worked as a full-fledged body that should be controlling the justice system. This is the crucial body to be reformed, because it takes care of appointment of judges and disciplinary accountability of judges, and this body is not doing its job at this point. That is why we need to first deal with the Judicial Council, and then we can proceed to further activities related to the judicial reforms.
Whoever wants to answer, and it's a very good one from our audience. It concerns the habit or possibilities that the change of government the new government will have problems with finding experienced professionals in matters as high-level corruption and organized crimes who do not have a DPS background. And one of our viewers asked, is there a risk that the current government uses the transition period to clean a number of files before a successor comes in? Whoever wants to answer, maybe
Can I answer?
Yeah.
Yes, I think they are actually using this time for clearing the files. I have even some insights from some of the ministries that from the administration actually that they are now clearing the files and documents. And as well, I do worry because Mr. Djukanovic said actually that he will give a mandate to the new prime minister not straight away, but till 23rd of, I think, October, he said. So I think that the DPS actually is trying their best to buy as much as possible time to finish some work before the transition of the government. I don't know what the others are thinking, but there are so many important documents which we need in the future if we would like to deal with the serious problems which this country is facing, and especially if we would like to fight corruption and organized crime. So we need these documents in the future, and we need evidence, but we will see what will be, what the new government will have.
Boris, just very quickly, you had experience governments. Were the obstructions the same?
Ovako, što se tiče nekih
as for some possibilities of hiding evidence or cleaning up files, I believe that this is not an easy thing to do. We have a lot of evidence. The prosecution service also has a lot of evidence. So the question is, what do we do with the prosecution service? How can we somehow wake up this prosecution service of ours? I think that there are plenty of forensic and other techniques that can help them find information regarding money flows in the executive power and potential corruption. Of course, there might be a trap for the new government in this. They have to set up the system first within the executive power so that they do not spend too much energy on witch hunt. We don't want the anti-corruption to turn into a witch hunt. We want a serious legal process, and we want to go further. We want to achieve economic stability and quick administration reform, because we spent 12 years already and we have not done anything in our reform of public administration, which was launched back in 2012. We have endemic corruption present in our public administration, and we have not reformed it sufficiently.
There's another question from the audience, and then I'll pose the last one. It's for Jovana. Jovana, when you say there are two Serbias, and I think this is not understood fully, because Jovana didn't say that there are two Serbias in Montenegro, there are two Serbias in Serbia. And if you can elaborate that for our viewers outside of the Western Balkans. But the question was which Serbias are close to Sipaca. So if you can first explain this two Serbia's issue, so we can wrap up this question.
I'll explain it through this relations with the Serbian Orthodox Church. Official Serbia, or the government, actually allocated 1.5 million during the summer for the Serbian Orthodox Church, and part of that money was used in Montenegro for the election purposes. So in that way, Vučić and the government supported this DEF and this coalition in Montenegro, and that means in that sense Vučić is connected with the Serbian Orthodox Church and with the election result in Montenegro. But now there are some calculations and some tendencies. There are fractions within the Serbian Orthodox Church between the bishop in Montenegro and one in Belgrade, and that our bishop is more connected with the future prime minister, and that means that there are even fractions within the DEF in Montenegro. So in that sense, the Vučić is connected with the results, but now we are not sure whether he is happy with these new developments regarding the establishment of the government. And then this moderate Serbia, they don't want to be connected with the Serbian Orthodox Church at all, as a civic moderate part of Serbia. And there was also a question from Andre whether Montenegro will be ready for EU membership in 2 years or something. I think that Montenegro will not be ready even in 2025, which was some projected year for accession that was with the strategy like 2 years ago from the European Commission level. But somehow, you know, when I'm saying that, I mean that we will not ready in terms of environment, in terms of finances. We will not be ready in terms of fulfilling political and economic criteria. But that does not depend only on Montenegro. That could be a political decision from the EU level. So let's see. I'm sure that we will not be ready, but that does not mean that we will not be members of the EU in 5 years period.
Thank you. And the last question from me for today, please take 2 minutes to answer it tops, even one, please. If you have to choose two things, very specific and realistic things that need to happen in the next 2 years, if this government survives 2 years, what are those two things? Let's start from Miloš.
Well, I think first of all, the government has to be totally transparent and open, and to open up all the money trails from the past and for the new spending. And this is the most elegant way to open up everything that the NGO sector, which was very strong in the past, to support the new government who has no resources, to support them to find possible corrupt things. Second of all, I think that Montenegro has to be, instead of COVID-free, it has to be corrupt-free country. This is very important because around 100 to 200 million euros per year is leaking from Montenegrin financial system, and it can really help us to stabilize our financial position. And let's say, third of all, to really everybody all the stakeholders has to really work hard, not to focus on PR stories about EU and accession to EU that we all want to go there, but we really have to focus on really doing our homework, and hopefully that the European Union will acknowledge all these things and let us in as a new member country.
Thank you, Miloš. Milka, two things, very short.
I agree with Miloš. I think that we should actually concentrate on two things. First, rule of law. Montenegro really is a country without justice, as Gilas said many years ago. So we need to become really country in which rule of law will function. And second, I think we really need strong economic reforms And we need a political elite which will work for people, not for themselves. And it would be really a change.
Thank you. Jovana?
Well, I'll take two really concrete things, and these are really connected with transparency and the rule of law and accountability and everything. I would like to see independent public broadcaster, and I would like to see responsibility for the envelope, recording, listing, and all other affairs in the country.
And Boris?
Vrlo kratko, kišobran je transparentnost.
I'll be brief. Transparency is very important, and we should focus on two things: economic reforms and rule of law.
Everyone, this concludes our panel discussion for today. Thank you for all from all our viewers and from everyone here at the European Endowment for Democracy. If anyone needs contacts or networking with our panelists, we're here to provide that, and the EED will be here definitely to continue supporting Montenegro and especially Montenegrin civil society in the future. Thank you, and I wish you a great day.
Thank you. Bye.